Hey everyone, welcome to another Roux Fitness podcast. This is part 2 of our racism, CrossFit, and Black Lives Matter conversation. I have with us a very special guest, Taheerah Britton. Taheerah, she's been a member at Roux for 2 years now. Holy cow, I finally got one right. So, I didn't look it up, I guessed.
Or probably longer than that.
I'm going to put this a little bit closer to you.
Yeah, because your baby's almost 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, so longer than that.
Awesome. And we have with us one of our coaches, Janna Jackson. She has been coaching with us for 2 years and has been a member for 6. 6 and a half. 6 and a half. So awesome. One of the things that I wanted to do today is, we did a podcast recently. It aired a few days ago. On this subject, right? And I wanted to have you two on here because I know Janice has some different experiences, and I wanted to have Taheerah on here to talk about her experiences and then kind of comment on where we are going forward, as well as some of the social situations we are seeing coming out of this, okay? So Taheerah, kind of tell me, where did you grow up?
I grew up in Montgomery, Alabama. Then when I was 26, I moved to the DC, Baltimore area, and now I'm in Louisiana.
How old are you now, Taheerah?
I am 40.
40?
No way.
I forget. Jeez, girl. Are you really? I thought you were going to say you were like 28.
I know, yeah. I'm like, wait, how long is she? That doesn't add up. Okay.
I'm 40.
Yeah, girl, you look amazing.
Yeah.
You do look good. Like, I was literally shocked when you said that. All right, I'm red now. All right.
Now y'all understand why that toddler is beating my butt.
Yeah. Oh, shit. All right. Janna, you're my age, right? You're 36?
I am, just a few months older than you.
36.
Yeah.
Janna, where'd you grow up?
I grew up mostly in San Antonio.
Okay. And then you moved to New Orleans for...
I moved to New Orleans when I was 20 for college. I finished school right after Katrina in the spring of 06. I moved to Chicago right after that for grad school, and then I came back in 2012.
Awesome. So, Taheerah, you grew up in a part of Alabama that we'd probably say is not known for being kind to people of color. Yes or no?
Oh, it was not kind to people of color. And it was really interesting. By the time I was born, the demographics in Montgomery, Alabama had changed where it was majority African Americans.
Oh, really?
So, yeah. So by the time I left, even now going back, it's still majority of blacks in Montgomery, Alabama. So the dynamics changed a good bit. But they still have high schools that are named for Confederate soldiers.
Is that changing or?
We hope. We're signing petitions to get those changed, but I was adamant as a young child about not going to a school that was named Robert E. Lee or Jefferson Davis.
So, Taheerah, you bring up a good point, and I think this is like part of continued education. And we talked before the show about how if anything's going to change coming out of these protests, and that we hope, but history says maybe no, right? I think there's a lot of signs that things are changing. But I want to give a little bit of how continued conversation can change everyone. So I was very indifferent about the Confederate statues in New Orleans. And I'm just going to be super honest about this. I was like, oh, it's part of history, blah, 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 and to me, I didn't see how it hurt. I definitely see that now, okay? Also, I saw an interesting post on Twitter yesterday. It's if you go to Germany.
Oh, yeah.
There are no Nazi statues. But that's part of history.
Right.
Right? So I thought that was super interesting. Now, I changed my mind along the way, and I'm also like under the same assumption that is a part of history of a treasonous country.
Yeah.
And
I mean, you think about it, like, why do we have these statues literally on a pedestal to honor these people that lost a war? And we thought, like, okay, we're abolishing slavery. Black people are all the way people. Like, you would think, like, okay, but no, we have these statues honoring them. Like, why? But like you said, for Germany, Nazi what? Like,
Right.
there's nothing there. But we all still know what happened.
Right.
And I think the issue that I have with it is, and I have always had this issue, is like, why are they still there? Why are they still there? And what are we going to do about this? But now we're seeing a change in this particular time period. It's like, it's time to get rid of them. Let's just take them down. What's the purpose of them even standing there?
You're seeing, I've seen across the news just Republican state senators, representatives across the South just being like, let's just get rid of them.
Yeah.
Sweeping change. So I think that's a step in the right direction.
I think it is, because especially from a person who's from Alabama, to always have that fight, like, Alabama is a great state, it's changing. And then you go home and you see these constant reminders of, you may see a Confederate flag on the interstate, which has been taken down just a couple of weeks ago, or you see the high schools that are predominantly black now that are Jefferson Davis or Robert E. Lee, and these students who are wearing their school name with pride because I graduated from this school, but at the same time it's still named after these people who were in the Confederate. And so now to have those changes, to have people petitioning to get those names changed, I think it's an awesome thing, but it took all of this to make those changes. It took a lot to make those changes.
I recently learned, like, it's interesting the amount of history that's not taught in high school or around most high schools. Yeah. No, Taheerah, I'm just learning about all this. Seriously, I read about how.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
As a teacher, I can attest to this. I have gotten in almost a lot of hot water for teaching things that's like, this is not right, babies. You can close that textbook. This is not right. Let me tell you what really happened. And so I laugh because a lot of things have been erased out of textbooks, or the history is many times one-sided. So when you're talking about change and so forth, it does start with many times the teacher. And oddly enough, my students have always gotten this militant, we're going to teach it the right way. Even when I had students for 6 years that were majority white students, I taught in a high school in Maryland where I think it was over 90% white, and I still was just like, let me tell you what really happened. And those when I really had those race conversations was with those students, and it was difficult.
Did you get in trouble?
It just so happens that I teetered the line a little bit.
Right.
And the students loved me, so they loved me. So I had that on my side. But, I taught a lot of stuff that I probably shouldn't have.
So, Taheerah, what you said a little bit of high school. What grade do you currently teach?
10th.
10th. Okay. So, all right. What school do you teach at now?
McMain, uptown.
McMain. All right. So, you probably don't have a problem teaching whatever you want to teach.
I don't. I teach 10th grade English, and we do stick with the curriculum for the most part, but I think we always supplement with resources that the students need to know about, books that they may need to read. And I think that's an important part of knowing history. It's just like, okay, this happened, but let's figure out why this happened. I'm going to teach you about protest. I'm going to teach you about revolutions. I'm going to teach you about this, but let's also understand about different perspectives of different people who were there, whether it's women or whether it's blacks, or maybe it was those other races that came into play. But I'm going to teach you all of that.
Right.
And it's important that we had those conversations. It's also important that we teach those students or the younger generation coming behind us that you are the change makers. And as we see, when you look on the news, those are the change makers now.
Yeah. I read, I think it was the 1800s. Post-Civil War, there was a lot of representation from black people in local state government, a lot of voting, to where they could actually help push, I guess, equal rights. And I basically read, so what people don't know is the parties flipped around this time. But it was the Democrats then, which became the Dixiecrats, or that was the Dixiecrats, and then they became the Republicans. It switched. But anyway,
Yeah.
Regardless.
Abraham Lincoln was Republican. People
all-
were like, what?
All across the South, and I think it was in Louisiana. I'm not totally sure on that. I read this yesterday. But black people were just slaughtered on the way to the ballot box. I want to say that was like 1863. But anyway, it's just the more I read about it, the more that I didn't know, the tougher it gets. So, with that being said, that's the name of our podcast. Lighter heart note. When I think there's a lot of ignorant people out there that just fly the Confederate flag because they think it represents the South. Okay. How does that make you feel? Both of you.
It upsets me because that flag was flown at a time when there were slaves and families were ripped apart. You know, black people weren't considered a whole person. You know, my life back then truly wouldn't have mattered. I was just somebody's servant and whatever. I was supposed to do whatever they wanted. So it's like, maybe they think it's part of history, like the statues, but it offends me. And I'm like, if I see that, I'm like, I can never be friends with that person. Because there's a fundamental disagreement on, you know, like humanity. Like we just think two different things. You know what I mean? Like, and I would never even attempt to be.
You wouldn't walk around. Well, I mean, some people do, but no sane, normal person would walk around with a swastika on their arm.
Listen, if
I mean, I see it out there. There's people out there, but
that person who's doing that is sending a message.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? They're sending a message. You know what they mean, and so like that's what I think when I see a Confederate flag.
What about you, Taheerah?
It's the same. It's the same. It's very, to me, it was always offensive. I always cringe. And it was really interesting when I was put in situations where I had to deal with people directly who had those Confederate shirts on, and I still had to be the teacher, or I still had to be the person like, okay, this is very awkward. But
did you talk to them about it?
I did. It really had gotten to a point where I had to talk with the particular students and let them know, like, out of respect for me, when you come in my classroom, you're going to have to change the shirts inside out. But why? It's heritage. And no, it's not. Just turn it inside out for my sake at this point. Mutual respect. And it got to that point, it's like, okay, we're just not going to even wear them to school because we know we have her class. But it really had to come down to that conversation. It's just like, if you, out of respect, you have to understand where I'm coming from. I'm not going to treat you any differently, but because that's my job. I'm a teacher. This is a child, but you're going to have to turn that inside out. And even now when I see a Confederate flag, I cringe. It's like, wow, people really still think like that at this time period.
I texted Janna yesterday. Was it yesterday?
Yeah, time is irrelevant these days.
Time's irrelevant. Yeah. Around the corner, I saw one flying on a house. I mean, it was a beat up house. It was there was a Trump flag, and then there was a American flag, and then there was a Confederate flag. And I'm like, I don't think you can fly the American flag and the Confederate flag at the same time.
Two different things.
It's very two different things. But nonetheless, I texted Janna, and I was like, I want to burn this flag down. That was like my gut reaction. It's nuts. But that's how I feel these days. And I mean, I've always felt that way.
Yeah.
Okay. But now there's like a visceral reaction. And I feel like you are starting to see a lot more, I don't want to say it, not woke white people, but white people that were sympathetic. I'm going to say not racist, okay?
Right.
But just living life that all of a sudden, like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Yep. And that's what's needed. It really is what's needed, because the Confederate flag battle, and I'm sure you can agree with me, has been something that we have throughout our childhoods have seen on people or just driving. And again, it's offensive. It hurts, and it's disgusting. But at the same time, me being disgusted and fed up, and you being disgusted and fed up, that's when we really have to make that, because I can be disgusted and fed up because I've been like that for 40 years. But when we have those conversations, those open, honest conversations, that's when change actually happens, because we can do it. We've been doing it. We've been protesting. We've been fussing about it. But now it's that time where it's just like, okay, we need everybody, not just people on the sidelines saying, oh, well, I'm sorry for you. And
Right.
I'm sorry, I don't like it either. But now it's those people who are saying, we're going to fight alongside with you, and that's what we need.
Yeah. Taheerah, what age do you remember your first like encounter with overt racism?
Oh my gosh. I remember I could have been about 4 or 5, and my mother was shopping at Sears in Alabama. And if you know my mom, you know that she's not stealing anything. She doesn't even use profanity. She doesn't even yell. She'll lecture you, but she's not going to yell. And I remember the store manager and a police officer or security guard almost attacking my mother because they thought that she was stealing. And before she can even get the receipt out, it really was like she was stealing. And to this day, my mom just would not go to Sears, period. And I remember being terrified as a little girl in a store, knowing that my mom didn't steal. I was right there when she paid for it. But the fact that maybe she had a baby bag or something with her. I can't remember what it was, but to think that she stole something. And even then, after they realized that she didn't steal anything, to, no apology or anything, just go, okay. And she's never went back in Sears, and I remember that. I do remember that.
When you moved to the D.C., Maryland area, did you still experience racism, or was it much different?
Ooh, I had the opposite experience. I had the really opposite experience, because when I was, like I said, when growing up, when I was coming along in Montgomery, Alabama, my neighborhood was all black. My Catholic school that I went to from 1st to 9th grade was all black. The Catholic church I went to was all black. I didn't have a lot of interactions with.
I went to Catholic school my whole life. I had the opposite experience. Not to interrupt you, I legit did not see a black nun until 2013, and I was like, I didn't know that could happen.
Really?
Yeah. In my Catholic schools, when I lived in Atlanta for a little bit, not to interrupt your story, it was like mostly white, a few black kids. When I was back in San Antonio, it was mostly Hispanic, and in my high school, it was 10 black girls in my class. But
was that weird for you, Janna?
To
be like one of 10?
No, because in San Antonio, like, it's a largely Hispanic population, and in my previous school, out of 20 kids, there were 4 white kids, myself, and then 15 Hispanic kids.
Okay.
So that wasn't
odd.
Yeah.
Not like maybe Michelle's experience in the last podcast, where she was like, there's no Hispanic kids. It was like
right. Yeah.
Like 10% of the school is black. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So you moved to DC.
I don't even know how that looks. So I went to Alabama State, which is an HBCU. All of my first 2 years of teaching was outside of Selma. Again, 100% African American. So I didn't have any interactions really with like a lot of whites until I moved to Maryland. And then I moved to the Eastern Shore of Maryland. So the Eastern Shore is very different from Baltimore. Eastern Shore is majority white. To a point where my neighborhood that I moved in was off the Chesapeake Bay. It was gorgeous. I looked around and I was just like, I am not in Alabama anymore. And I remember the first day of professional development, I remember calling my mom. I was like, Mom, I've never seen this many white people in my life. And it was really interesting because of the part of Maryland that I went to. But even in school itself, there were days when I didn't see another black person until I looked in the mirror.
Wow.
And that experience was it was a totally different experience for me, but I learned a lot. That's when I really started having those really, really in-depth, honest race conversations with my coworkers who really didn't have a lot of interactions with Black people, except for the few students that we had. My students who didn't have any interactions with Black people, except for the 1 or 2 Blacks that were in their classrooms and me. So that's when those really, really honest race conversations happened, and that went on for about 6 years. And then that's when I transferred schools and went to another school on the other side of Maryland, which was again 100% Black. And then when I was teaching in D.C., it was Black, Hispanic, and a lot of African immigrants. So I've had
the whole gamut.
I've had the gamut.
So you moved back to New Orleans.
Yeah.
How long ago? I'm sorry.
I moved to New Orleans 2017.
2017.
Mm-hmm.
And like, was your experience here any different, or?
I have had some of the best experiences in New Orleans, whether it was with my white colleagues, especially here at the CrossFit Gym. I've had a really good experience. I haven't had any in-your-face racism here, but I can tell you when I was on the Eastern Shore of Maryland, I experienced a lot of it.
So interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, because when you think about Maryland, you think about Baltimore, you think about Prince George's County, you think about Montgomery County, you think about Howard County, but no one knows about the Eastern Shore of Maryland, where there's lots of cornfields.
We talked about it. We talked about it on the last show with Randy and Michelle about how New Orleans is a little bit different because there's so many interactions with each other, and like it's a shared culture. Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I 100% think that I know there is racism here in this city. You know, I know there is. I think you might see less of it because of that shared culture. Doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
Right.
And it also doesn't mean, like, it may not be overt, but there's definitely covert racism where it's kind of in your head, you know.
Microaggressions is like the word that I thought about after we spoke, because it's not the overt stuff, it's the little stuff. Like Taheerah talked about with her mom, and like me growing up, I posted a thing on Facebook, like me growing up, it's like, don't ever leave the store without buying something. Right. Or, you know, if I bought a gum, get a bag, because somebody might think you took something. But it's like, what if I go to Rouse's and I need, like, for a school project, we had to buy marshmallows, and like, what if there were no marshmallows? Like, I feel weird. I'm about to be 37 in a couple weeks. Like, I feel weird leaving the store with no bag, like nothing now.
It's interesting you say that because I never feel that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because even I remember my daughter, we went to the Strawberry Festival, and she was like about 4 months. And of course, I'm always going to have a bag because
you got a lot of stuff.
Yeah, a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And I remember going to
Baby,
Dollar
yeah.
General, and the gentleman there, the young man there,
who's not a gentleman.
not a gentleman.
That's what Taheerah is nicely putting.
He was not nice. He wanted to take my bag. Now, mind you, there are other, like, we really need to take, it's the Dollar General, sir. I just want some water to mix his baby formula. And he was just like, we really don't, we really need to take your bag, and we don't want to allow it to come through the store. Again, sir, it's the Dollar General. I'm going to come buy this, and whatever you got to do, you're going to do it. But I'm going to buy this water so I can mix this baby's formula. And at that point, it was just like, you got to do what you got to do, but I'm going to get this. You're not getting my baby bag.
Right.
You know? And even now, I still kind of feel weird, like people are watching me, because I do have, it's a baby bag, but even still, when I've gone through stores or retail stores, or you kind of feel like, is somebody watching me? Mm-hmm. Or you kind of feel like, are there glances, because I now have this bag, and you think that I'm going to steal.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So, you know, earlier we were talking about, like, the honest race conversations that need to be had. I think they don't happen because, you know, a lot of white people who, again, may not be racist, are afraid to have that conversation because it presents awkwardness, right?
Yeah.
And maybe they don't want to understand. I don't know. But it means that they probably have to change how they think. You know, like I talked about how the white privilege thing. You know what I mean? And it took me 3 years to figure that out, right? But I had never heard it like that. But you're never going to hear it like that unless you
Right.
speak about it, right? My friend Anita that I talk to all the time, we probably talk about race every other conversation, if not like every conversation. And it's been good for me. And she just straight up calls me out, which is, no, it's a good
No,
thing. It
it's
makes me
good.
think. It makes
Yeah.
me think. And sometimes I disagree with her, and that's my prerogative, I guess, you know, but we have to have that conversation. You know, what happened with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery, right? Countless other people, okay? With it being in such a short amount of time. And look, this happens all the time, not on camera, right? And I think people fail to see that. The thing that's shocking is like people aren't afraid to do these things, right? Taheerah? It's crazy. You know, Janna talked about how because of that nature, even though you lived a very different experience in San Antonio, in New Orleans, and in Chicago, where you maybe never came across some overt racism, it caused you to second guess one time at a speeding stop, right?
Yeah.
And even though nothing happened, it's in your head,
It's in my head.
right? To hear anything like that with you?
Always. It's always that conversation, even with my husband. It's like, okay, there's the police. Make sure you're going to speed limit. Or do you have your registration? Or yesterday we were going somewhere and it's like, look, make sure you have your driver's license, your registration. He looked at me so crazy. Like, I always have that. I was like, just make sure. But it's those conversations that we always have, or even conversations that my sister even had to have with my nephew, or just don't run, don't look back, just be respectful. Like, but for real, don't run. These are conversations that we have, and he's in middle school, but it really are those conversations. And even with myself, I still get a little nervous whenever, a police car is next to me. I'm like, okay, am I going to speed limit? Am I doing the right thing?
10 and 2.
Yeah, it's like, it's always
And
that.
me, I'm like, what the shit? Oh my God, you
Yeah.
gotta be kidding.
Right. It's always that constant fear that something can happen. And the sad part is when I talk to males and like men my age, and every single black male just about have had a run-in with the police for doing nothing. Or the conversation we had once was how young were you when you first had a gun pulled on you from the police? And that's something that's a real conversation when you start asking black men that question, and some black women, you're just like, wow, it is blown away. Or just something, even when I was in high school, just being in a parking lot talking to my friends and the police being super aggressive to a point where I'm crying, but I have to just get home to my mom. It's just for being in a parking lot, not doing anything really, just because we're out and we just want to talk, and it's a really nice night. But those are things that happen, and we're just always in constant nervousness and fear of, it's not as easy as people saying, oh, okay, just don't do anything and nothing will happen.
Right.
I really hate that statement, because it's like, oh no, it's not that easy. It is not that easy. But we constantly hear that.
Mm-hmm.
We constantly hear that.
Yeah, it's sad. All right, let's talk about some things that are going on. Okay, I have some things jotted down. So I want to talk, and I want to be as honest about this as possible in terms of my thinking, and maybe you guys tell me, or just give me feedback on it. All right, so let's talk about the Drew Brees situation. Okay, Taheerah likes this.
Bless his heart.
Yeah, so that's cute. So, I said when this happened, it was the emoji
Yeah.
face palm. For those of you who are listening on iTunes, Spotify, or Google Play, it was the face palm emoji. And I was like, oh, Drew, bad timing, man. Like, this is not the time. And I was just kind of shocked that he said that. And I'm like, all right, he's got to apologize. He's about to get drug. And he got drug, right? And so my thinking, though, once he started apologizing, sent the video, and, I follow a lot of black sports media in New Orleans and around the country. And there are still a lot of people that are like, screw him. Like, it doesn't mean anything. I have a different mindset, and it follows along with Greg Glassman. And just because how easily maybe I think I could step into a pile of shit, right? Or any of us. Like I said, with the white privilege, that's not nearly as egregious as what he had to deal with. But I think that we have to have, as a culture, the ability to, I don't want to say forgive, but let's allow him to learn from the situation. Because I am not necessarily, I don't like cancel culture. Okay. I know there's a lot of people that use that think differently than me. But in terms of I think people should be allowed to make mistakes, learn, and grow. Thoughts?
Here's my thinking. So he said what he said, I guess, in 2016 when Colin Kaepernick was still in the league and kneeling. And, Colin Kaepernick asked a veteran how he should peacefully protest.
Not, a lot of people don't know that.
He asked, you know what I mean? So
there's an Army Green Beret who told him to kneel.
Yeah, so
White
there's
guy.
that.
White guy.
That's 2016, right?
2016.
So, and then everything is happening now, and then Drew does that interview. I'm not sure what the interview was about other than the clip where he doubled down on his comments. And you would hope in 4 years he would have learned something. And I'm hesitant to accept that apology, like, oh, he's apology paragraphs on Instagram, because you've had time to talk to your teammates who it's probably a mostly black locker room. They literally protect you. Why haven't you taken the time to learn until you just had to double down on your statement? And now you're gonna learn. I don't want him to apologize. I don't want an apology. I want to see actual action and him understanding what he said is hurtful to people. And it's fine if he reveres the flag that way. I had a similar experience as Malcolm Jenkins, where my grandparents also fought in the war. Do you know what I mean? But it's like they probably came back to two very different welcomes.
Right.
Like it's understanding that, that's frustrating that he wouldn't take the time to learn. He's just going to double down on his stance and think that, kneeling is disrespecting the flag when it's not the point of what he was doing.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with you. I totally agree. And I also, I think the part that gets me is the fact that you, like you said, Janna, you had 4 years to have these conversations. You had time to understand that the kneeling is about the exact same thing that happened to George Floyd. That is what the protest was about. Like, what way do you want us to protest? What do you want us to do?
No, I think that's a beautiful point.
Everyone is saying, don't protest like this, or don't protest like this. Well, that was a very peaceful protest. He wasn't bothering anybody. He didn't say anything. He simply kneeled. And the thing with that is, just like everybody else, I do hold a flag in a certain stance because I'm American. But at the same time, it's like he's kneeling. He's really not bothering anybody. This is the issue that he's protesting. This is the issue that he's bringing light to. And yet you still didn't understand.
Right.
You thought it was about disrespecting the flag. It was never about disrespecting the flag. And that's the thing that, Like, come on, Breeze. Come on.
So, like I'm with you all on that, and I understand that. I guess for me, I'm like, I don't think we should forget like everything he's done for the New Orleans community.
And that's the frustration, right? Because he has helped this community.
Right.
More so than like
what are you doing,
right.
man? Like, there's a lot of Black people live in New Orleans. Like, you've got to understand how what you're saying is affecting the community that you have helped so much with money. And football is just a game, but like with a championship and playoffs, like what brings our city together, the share culture that we discussed, like. What are you doing?
Right. So, I mean, I'm hopeful that he's going to put his money where his mouth is.
Yeah.
Because I mean, that's what he can do. And I think he will. I think he came out pretty hard on Twitter on Saturday night, and
but also
shocked a lot of people.
You think about what he says; he's passing it on to his kids. That's what you have to think about. You know what I mean? Because like. The racism is not, it's a multi-generational thing, right? And we are not going to just stop it in its tracks now. Like, it's about what are the kids learning? Like, what's Taheerah teaching her daughter? What are you teaching your kids?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, that's how it works. So it's like, what is he teaching his kids? Like, are his kids going to learn from this? Or are they just going to think, like, Daddy got in trouble with the media?
Right.
You know what I mean? And not understand what happened.
No, I think they have to have a very real conversation with their kids. But that's we talked a little bit about Randy and Michelle. Is that's where we can make the biggest progress is with our kids, and not only with like white people's kids in terms of like teaching them everyone is equal, right? But also with us trying to stop systemic racism among the Black youth, right? So. The similar thing happened with Greg Glassman. Taheerah, I don't know if you knew about that, did you?
I saw it on Twitter.
You saw it on Twitter. We're all on Twitter. You should follow me.
I should. But I saw it on Twitter, and I was like, uh-oh. That's all I could say was, uh-oh.
Right.
I didn't know what else to say.
Right. So the thing that people don't, and I probably have a better handle on who Greg Glassman is than most people. He is very, like, bullish, okay? But he's also done a lot of things for people. He's built schools in Kenya, things like that. And what he was replying to, he replied to the like Institute of Medical Health or Public Health or something like that. And he's already had like spats with them, and I think he was trying to like troll them. And it turned out very bad. Very bad. And so, what happened in the CrossFit world is I'm part of these Facebook groups with a bunch of owners. I started getting phone calls from CrossFit owners across the country. What are you going to do? This is what we're doing. And I'm like, well, wait to see how this plays out for a second. Okay. Like, why don't we give it a second here? And also, by the way, CrossFit is more than one person. It's a little bit different. You know what I mean? Like, this brand has been all about health and wellness, despite maybe the demographics being mostly white, right? And we talk a lot about like how can we get more Black people involved in CrossFit. I'll announce it now. I didn't announce it last podcast, but I'm working with Randy, son of a saint. We're going to get Janna involved, and we're going to create a scholarship fund in New Orleans for Black youth to start CrossFit. And it's not for our gym; it's for any gym that they want to choose. And that's the way we can get more people involved, and if you guys can come up with any other ideas for that, let me know. We'll be posting that link to that charity probably if it's done in time in the show notes. If not, we'll make a post about it. But that's like real solutions, right?
Right.
How can we change the culture of something? Diversity is probably there. I mean, what do you think, Taheerah?
I think that's a very good start, because even when I'm doing CrossFit, I remember the first time I saw Janna, I was like, hi. Because even when I dabbled and when I was living in the DC area, it was really just me as a Black person. And so, when you tell people like, yeah, I'm going to my CrossFit gym, I love those people. And they're like, Black people do CrossFit. Yeah, do CrossFit, but it's all about health and wellness. And I think one of the biggest things that I have taken away from CrossFit is the ability to lift, the ability to learn how to pick up things off the floor,
Right.
or the ability to help people move in a way and
Be strong for your baby.
yeah. But the thing is that to me was one of the biggest. It is amazing to be able to tell people like, girl, don't lift that like that. Make sure you lift like correctly. And I think that's a big thing that needs to be taught to, generations, and especially, Blacks, because you can probably attest to it, like your family members. And so I don't know about yours, but mine are, I don't know. There's so many diabetes, so much high blood pressure, and so much just cholesterol. And I don't have it, but I try and work every day not to have it. And so I think that starting young with people doing CrossFit and fitness and saying, oh, this is just not a white person sport. It really is for everyone. And it's just a beautiful community. Like, even it's amazing. So I think that's a awesome start.
The first, I think it was the first competition I did in Mississippi. It was like everybody was leaving. It was just like there was a black gentleman there. I don't know if he was a coach or what. He was like, "Where are people?" I was like, "That's a good question. I don't know." But yeah, I mean, like, that's a good start to like help diversify, because this is my community. You know what I mean? These are my people here. Like, I'm like, do I have any friends that are not at this CrossFit gym? I don't know. So it's like to see like Glassman's
kind of right?
Yeah, it's like to see Glassman's comments. I'm like, that doesn't represent the CrossFit that I see on the ground every day, and even going to other gyms doing competitions. That's not what I experience.
Typically, it's a very inclusive community. Yeah. Maybe despite the fact that the demographics don't say so.
Right. Absolutely. And I remember before I even moved here, just being on the phone with you and interacting, it was just like, oh, it's so warm and friendly.
See, y'all? I'm not a dick.
I remember. And it's and that what made me want to join Roux. And the first time I came, everybody was just so welcoming, and the community was just so welcoming. And I really cannot talk about you guys enough. I know I don't see you guys enough, but
I appreciate it.
I talked about you guys. It's my family. Those are my little favorite faces.
I definitely appreciate that. I mean, look, we, I talked about it last time, but I definitely want a diverse culture in this gym. And that includes, like, I think the wonderful thing is, we have police officers in the gym. We have black people in the gym. We all understand each other, care for each other, and coexist, right? And maybe, like, you don't have similar interactions where we can talk about this or interact with each other in this type of fashion outside of this. No?
I think there needs to be more. But I wish that, I think a lot of it, the interaction part with us, I can speak for myself. I think that I personally need to interact more. And that comes from me being a little bit more open. I'm not saying that I intentionally try to, but it's like life. And then it's like, but I miss you. So.
Right. Yeah. Janna?
Yeah. I don't know. What was the question?
I don't know. I forgot to. All right. So we had, it's interesting, like, guys, how quickly this is changing right now. So we released, today is Tuesday? Yeah.
Tuesday.
We released the podcast.
I have to wear the watch to say
with Randy and Michelle yesterday. And last night, I got a text message. I got lots of text messages all day about the podcast from white people, how much they love the podcast, okay? And I got a text message last night, and I thought this was super interesting, and I wanted to ask you guys about it, is there is now a stream of consciousness maybe about every interaction, which maybe is good or bad, but the member asked, like, hey, I listened to the podcast, and then I came and worked out in the afternoon, and there was one of our members, Troy, was here, a black guy, and we had, like, the New Orleans bounce station on, and it was dropping a bunch of N-bombs, and he's like, all of a sudden, I recognized that, and I didn't know how to feel, like, should we avoid that type of music, or does it make you feel uncomfortable?
I don't say that word.
Right.
Like, even in...
I know, I mean in music.
Here's the thing that, you struggle with. I don't say that word.
Right.
But it's the way to take it back is to make it our own. Right? Like, and it's right. Like, I mean, I guess I've never said it. Like, it's always just been like, ooh,
right.
Like the worst word. But if it's something that, if we can take ownership of it, and I don't know if I'm putting my foot in my mouth, but it's like, how do we take the power back from that word? Is it taking it? You know what I mean? Like,
what do you think, Taheerah?
I'm like Janna. I do not use the word. My family does not use the word. When I think about most of the music that I have listened to and growing up, that word is in there. And I like Janna, it's like, are we in the black community kind of takes this sting out of, we take out that word back. And it's really interesting as I'm working out.
You don't hear it.
I really don't hear it. I really.
Yeah, that was basically.
that
was basically him saying, like, I noticed it all of a sudden,
right.
And I looked around and I'm like, well, there's 19 of us white guys and one black person, and there's a bunch of N-bombs.
Right.
Like, oh shit.
I mean, look, I enjoy Drake,
you know what I mean? Like,
and I enjoy Lil Wayne, and it's a word they say. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know. But
and it is really interesting because now, especially now that I have a daughter, a lot of especially the trap music I used to listen to, and it's just like, yes, I'm pulling up in Johns Hopkins, listening to Gucci Mane, yes, of course. And then now when I'm in the car, it's like I have these R&B nursery rhymes now, so I do, girl. I let you listen to them. They're so awesome. I let you listen.
Yeah, send them to me too. Send them to me because I'm sick of listening to Frozen too. So.
But it's really interesting how that person thought about that, and then I'm in the gym listening to the music, dancing, and I really
we're all dancing too.
I don't notice it, and I guess maybe because of the music that I do listen to, that has it a lot. But I commend that person for noticing that, and it's like, wow, maybe there needs to be a change, and that's where it starts. That's exactly where it starts.
So what do you think? Should we? I guess it's hard to monitor that. But I guess if it's over and over again, it's hard. It's just like, look, we listen to some songs where we'll be a minute and a half in, and I'll be coaching, all of a sudden I'll be like, oh shit!
Yeah.
Now I need to go change it because it's like F that something. Yeah. Janna knows what I'm talking about. It was on the other day.
So I was like, get to the pop.
I'm like, I cannot get to the iPhone fast enough.
I mean, if you play the censored version, it's like, it doesn't lose anything to me.
Right, it's just hard to find.
I know what they're saying.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, but
it's more or less, hey, thanks for recognizing. Like,
right.
If it's a bunch in a row, let's change it. You know,
and it's like, maybe whoever that member was, like, you don't sing along to that. Do you know what I mean?
Well,
or like,
I never sing.
Well, no, but I'm saying, like,
not even when I am by myself. Like, it's because I don't want to sing that verse and then maybe sing it elsewhere out in public, so that I just don't sing it. So that's how I operate.
But the interesting thing is I have not even really heard, and now I'm trying to think, like, what song I dance to, because I dance a lot, and I'm like, what song are you like with me? Like, what song are we talking about? So it's one of those things where I can't tell you that, but try and maybe find a censored song to.
Right.
If you have to.
No, I get it. So let's say this. How do we, when do we say black people, African Americans, people of color? Does it matter to you? What do you prefer? I know Randy said he prefers to call black.
I read something the other day, and I hadn't thought about it, how they're not interchangeable. because, and I don't know if I'm misremembering, because Black encompasses more, where like somebody from Jamaica may not be African American.
Right. African American is
my
very
descendants-
specific.
Yeah,
Right.
specifically, or from Africa. I mean, I don't know how the world.
So it would be like breaking it down to like I'm German,
Right.
but not.
Does it, any of those three words bother me? Do I think they all apply to me? Yes. I think they all apply. None of them bother me either way.
Taheerah?
Same. Because even with the podcast today, I think I have probably used African American and Blacks interchangeably. So it never really, it was never anything that's like, oh, well, I prefer to be called this and I prefer to be called that. I just know one word I will not be called.
Right.
But,
Right.
but it really doesn't bother me.
Cool.
It doesn't.
What do you think are some like tangible solutions that we can be doing on and I mean white people, like local or everyday type of situation, or what are some things we can be doing?
Vote.
Vote.
I think that it's some people who don't vote, or they think I'm going to vote this way because that's really how I feel, without looking at what is the bigger picture, what's actually going to make a change. The privilege of not being able to vote and being like, I'm not going to be affected by this no matter what happens. Like, that's very nice for you. Whereas, Trump got elected and I could see these horrible things happening, and they're happening because, like Randy said, like the president sets the tone.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? And it's not the only election that matters. Like, vote in your local elections, because if you want to see actual true change at the level that it affects you every day, it's in the local elections.
Yeah, absolutely. I heard that yesterday. Yeah, local elections matter a lot. They're very powerful. But all elections.
Yeah. Yeah.
That sounded terrible.
Yeah. Now that I
You
think about it,
caught
you just said it.
I caught it. I don't know if Taheerah caught it.
I didn't.
I basically about to said all elections matter.
But it's important to vote in every election.
I looked at you, it was coming out of my mouth, and I'm like, ah.
I didn't catch it. But not only please vote, please, but also have those honest conversations. You have to have those conversations in order to understand. Because what may work for me, I'm all about advocacy. I'm all about like you're starting a scholarship fund for health and wellness. That, to me, that's a big start. But also have those conversations. Do not be afraid to have those
I saw
conversations.
some stuff on social media where, I don't know if it was white people or black people saying it, but like, stop asking your black friends about everything that's going on or if they're okay or anything like that. I feel like it's the opposite, right? Like, I mean, I checked in on you.
Yeah. So, like, here's the thing. Like, I came in here last week and it was just like, I'm exhausted.
Right.
And it maybe wasn't from the check-ins or whatever, but it's like everything that like just kind of sits like just below the surface was like at the surface. Mm-hmm. And then so you have people and you're like, and it's like, we all say, how are you doing? You're like, I'm okay. But it's like, I'm not okay.
Right.
Like, I'm not okay. Like, I'm struggling. My friends honestly ask me, they're like, I'm struggling. I'm like, well, if you ever want to talk, but it's not always like specifically I want to talk about this race thing. You know what I mean? It's like an everyday interaction, but it's just like, yeah, I mean.
I started saying, how are you doing outside of all this shit that's going on?
And that to me means the world. So a lot of people, I've actually heard that, like, stop asking. It's like, no. I've been in situations where asking those courageous questions made the world of difference. Trust me, ask those questions. And I remember when last week I really just wanted to bundle up on my sofa in my favorite blanket. And that's exactly what I did because I was so exhausted. Like, maybe I should go protest. Maybe I should do this. And it was like, I don't even have that energy at this point. I've been there, done that. I don't have the energy. But what I can do is sit here and have this conversation. What I can do is talk to my husband as a black man and just be there for him. What I can do is hug Janna. What I can do is have that conversation with you and just like, hey, I miss you guys.
Right.
And listen to the podcast. That's the things that I can do. And
I just thought of this actually, and I think this is an important one that I'm going to throw on here. And I added a bunch of stuff that we could do on a government level last week, but for this, I'm thinking like, what can we all do? And I think it's get out of your bubble. You know, like a lot of people listen to the same people for their news or to formulate their opinions all the time. Diversify that and then decide what you think.
Right.
You know what I mean? But like, don't just listen to the same news station. And that goes for everyone. Okay. Because there's a high chance that you're not getting the full story on any of those news stations,
Yeah.
period. Okay. Not a single one. Okay. But like, seek different opinions and then formulate your own based off of a variety of people. You know, I think that's super important. Like, I remember, and I go through this on social media where I was like, I'm not going to unfriend anyone because I need to see it all. Right? Like, I need to see everyone's opinion. I don't want to live in my own echo chamber. Well, I'm done that. It's
You know, like
the axe comes out pretty hard. But that doesn't mean like I still, you know, I listen to, for podcast wise, I listen to Bill Maher on Friday nights. I also listen to Dave Rubin, who is like super right. Well, he's a libertarian, the left going right. I don't know. But I listen to a lot of different sides. I know that I need to listen to more black podcasts. You know, 100%. I need to know those opinions, hear that side of the story, because a lot of people are missing that, you know? And then you have to realize that you don't have to, just because you like someone and you get some of your news from them, you don't have to listen to everything they say.
no.
You know? Like, here's a perfect example, and I might get torched for this, but I'm just going to say it, okay?
I just want to know what I'm excited to hear what it is.
So I listen to Clay Travis's podcast. Okay, he does Outkick the Coverage to Hear. You probably don't know who he is. You check it out. He says some pretty wild stuff. He tries to think of himself as like, I just base on facts. Some of the stuff he says is pretty wild, and I have to like think of. I literally do this. I listen to it. Sometimes I don't. Like, I'm not listening to it right now because it's too much. But I'd be like, oh, I agree with that. Nah, that's crazy, or that's stupid, or that makes sense. This is stupid. You know. And you have to be able to do that and go back and forth. Like, you just don't take one person and say, like, everything that comes out of that person's mouth, I'm going to either agree with or think that it's true or that's the right way. Like, a lot of people say good things. A lot of people say stupid shit. You shouldn't take everything I say for 100% truth. Formulate your own truths, you know?
you have to. You have to.
So,
Really do.
anything you guys want to add?
No. And I probably said this 1,000,001 times, this podcast, have those conversations. Please have those conversations. Don't be afraid to have those conversations. Just because you will learn something. You will understand something. And it's always good to see someone else's viewpoints and understand where they're coming from and their experiences. Just like Jenna and I are both Black women, but our experiences growing up were totally different. Even our experiences as adults are totally different. But the fact remains is that we still have those shared experiences, Black women in America. We still have those experiences, and many people, many non-Blacks are not going to understand it while we do certain things that we do, or while we, like you said, when we get to a red light or we see a police officer, we're just like this. Or when we're in a grocery store, in a store, we're always kind of like, okay, I'm not going to steal. You can see my purse. Or those experiences that we've had, or those, when we're talking about systematic racism, or when we've had overt racism happen to us, and how we feel about it. So please do have those conversations.
And y'all, Taheerah has a 18-month-old girl, okay? Let's change the world for her so that she doesn't have to think about that in a store, that she doesn't have to think about that at a red light or wherever she goes. So that's my hope for her, that we can change society, we can change the world to where Taheerah's daughter will have the same fears, hopes, dreams as my daughter. So,
Absolutely.
y'all, make sure to rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast. I got to do it.
I know, it's just funny.
I got to do it. It's funny. We went this super serious thing to this. So I appreciate it, y'all. If you want to check Taheerah out on Twitter, what is your handle?
At One Fun Educator. So
Oh.
it's at @1fun_educator.
_educator. I like it. Janice is private. Where
Instagram, you can find me JJAX83.
Taheerah, you on Instagram?
Same one at @1fun_educator.
Love it.
Number 1, spelled 1.
Number 1.
Okay.
All right. Numeral 1, fun _educator. Love it, guys. Peace out.